All right, good morning. I see that there are two of you currently joining me. I suspect that there hopefully will be a few more that will be joining me very soon. So I'm going to wait just a couple of minutes and then we're going to get started. So please hang in there with me. For those that are there, feel free to use the live chat feature that hopefully you see on the right-hand side of your screen. There we go. Naomi, I'm doing well. How are you doing? Naomi, can you hear me? Okay, good. All right. Well, don't go too crazy inside the house. But it is a bit challenging. It is a bit challenging, no question about it. Well, thanks for joining me today. Miss meeting with all of you on campus. All right. Well, I think in order to respect your time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I realize that some people will be joining us as I start the presentation, but that's okay. Hopefully they will just jump right in and feel comfortable asking questions. All right, good morning to you as well. So I may be getting people joining today that don't know who I am. Either they are an online student of mine or maybe a subscriber to my YouTube channel. So for those who don't know me and watching this at a future date, my name is Mark Guillette and I'm a professor of sociology at Valencia College. And currently my students are just finished or are working on religion this particular week. And so I started thinking maybe it might be a good idea to put on a YouTube live event about religion. And so here we are. And so I've entitled this, Let's Talk Religion. What I would like to do is share my spiritual journey with you. Should we call it spiritual journey? This is my story. I will be as open and candid as I possibly can and just kind of share with you where I started and where I ended or where I am today. I kindly ask that no one try to what is the word? Evangelize today in the chat box. But I do want you to feel comfortable asking any questions that you might be interested in asking at any point. I think probably what I'll do is I'll kind of go through my story and tell you what it was like. And then at the end, I'll come back and answer the questions. And if I don't answer your question appropriately, then please let me know and I will try to do a better job of answering it. Don't forget when you're here at my YouTube channel to subscribe. Click the bell for further notifications and click the like button if you like the video. If you don't like the video, then that's fine. Click the thumbs down. But hopefully you're going to like this and you're going to enjoy it. I see we have 4 people attending, so hopefully that number will go up. All right. Before I get started with my story, I see WDW Tuesday is here, so welcome to my sister-in-law, Joy. Before we get started, I do want to say that my intention in doing this is not to convert you to anything. It's not to tell you that what you believe in is wrong or bad. I believe that my job as a sociology professor is to get my students to think and think outside the box. And so what I'm not telling you today is I'm not telling you that what you believe is wrong, what you believe is bad, that you need to convert, that you need to change your thinking. I'm not saying any of that at all. And I'm going to probably say that multiple times throughout the presentation today. What I am saying is that I would like you to keep an open mind about what I'm talking about and what I'm going to share with you, and consider if there's any value to what I'm telling you. Okay? All right. So here is my story. So I was born and raised a Catholic. My father and my mother both were Catholics. Their parents were Catholics. Their parents were Catholics. And so you kind of see the trend. And generally, what we see in religion is, for most people end up being what their parents are. Be that good or be that bad, that's the case. And so when I was born a Catholic. Me personally, I had nothing to do with it whatsoever, nor does any child when they're born. So I'm thinking that if I was born in, let's say, India, I would probably be born into a family that practices Hinduism, nor would I have had anything to do with it. If I was born in a country, let's say, like the United Arab Emirates, I would have been born into a Muslim family. And guess what? I wouldn't have had anything to do with it personally. If I was born in the country of Thailand in Asia, I probably would have been born into a Buddhist family, and I wouldn't have had anything to do with it. So more often than not, when it comes to the issue of religion, people are what their parents are, and the tradition goes from generation to generation. So I was born into a Catholic family. I was baptized into the Catholic Church. Actually, being a native of Orlando, my parents went to a church, a parish, as they are called in the Catholic community, for those that are unaware of it. They're called a parish. And so the parish that we attended was over in what is now Altamont Springs. St. Mary Magdalene was the name of the Catholic church that we attended. So that's the church that I was baptized in. As I got a little older, my parents, for some reason, I believe it either had something to do with a scandal at the parish that we went to, a sexual abuse scandal with one of the priests, and or something to do with money, the church wanting to collect more money from the parishioners, the people that belong to the church. And my parents were turned off by that, whatever the case was. Perhaps it was a mixture of both of those issues. So they decided to transfer to another parish up in Apopka, which was a very, very small parish that basically met in, at the time, a mobile home. St. Mary Magdalene over in Altamont Springs was a very large, very well-to-do Catholic parish, whereas the Catholic parish up in Apopka, and the name escapes me, St. Francis of Assisi, was more or less for lower income people. So they had a trailer. They didn't have a lot of money. So we transferred there, and my parents got very involved in the church. And so I was encouraged to get involved with the church as well. So I became an altar boy. And for those that aren't familiar with Catholicism, an altar boy is someone who kind of aids and helps the priest during the Mass. And the Mass is, for those that are not Catholic, is kind of like the service. And so I would help the priest with communion. I would hold the Bible for him if he read out of it, and there were other tasks that altar servers would do. An altar boy. My mother was a Eucharist minister, and basically that means that she helped the priest distribute the host, or the body and blood of Jesus that was contained in a wafer and some wine. My father was an usher, and so we were very involved in the Catholic church that we attended. We got to know the priest very well. I remember his name, Father Tom. And he would often come over to our home and spend a Saturday night with us. I can't help but remember quite often when he came over, there was a lot of drinking involved. My mother and my father and him would drink until 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, talking about all kinds of things. I always found that kind of interesting. But when I was attending that Catholic church, I went through the confirmation process, which is one of several sacraments within the Catholic Church. And when you go through confirmation, you're generally in your early teens, so like 14, 15 years old. As I look back at that now, it's pretty interesting because as I think about both baptism and confirmation specifically, I'm not convinced that I knew what I was doing. Now, when I was baptized as a very young child, I obviously did not know what I was doing. Other people made the choice for me that I should be baptized in the Catholic Church. I'm a little iffy on this. I'm iffy on it because what it's doing is kind of imposing someone else's values and beliefs on me. And so I'm not saying it's necessarily a terrible, horrible thing, but I had no choice in the matter, and so I was baptized. When it comes to confirmation, again, this is something that you generally do in your teens, early to mid-teens, and so there was some level of buy-in, or I had the opportunity to. I guess I could have said, no, I don't want to do this, but if you think about, for many of you, being 14, 15 wasn't that long ago. Making big decisions on what religions to follow may not be at the top of your list, and you may not be as informed and educated about these issues as you process. Excuse me, but I didn't really understand what I was doing, and so I was confirming myself, or basically subscribing to a religious doctrine that I did not thoroughly understand. Well, be that as it is. All right, so we're fast forward a little bit more in my journey. When I got to about the age of 16 or 17, at the age that I could drive, I decided that I would explore the Protestant part of Christianity. Now, I want to clarify something. This is something that I clarified in our lecture that I hope that you've already looked at. If you haven't looked at it, then you're going to hear this again when you hear my religion lecture that I provided you in an email in Canvas. That Christianity is not one religion. Christianity actually has what's called denominations, and a denomination is a subcategory of a larger group. Up until about the year 1054, Christianity was one religion, and there weren't lots and lots of denominations. Christians simply identified themselves as Christians. But in the year 1054, there was a major split in the Christian church. Does anyone happen to know what split occurred in the year 1054? Or wait a moment and see if anyone can type that in the live chat on the right-hand side of your screen. Anyone know in the year 1054 what happened in the Christian church? Da 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 da. Da, da. I'm humming the Jeopardy song, by the way. Da 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 da. Okay, so I'm not seeing any responses in the chat feature. So I'll tell you, in the year 1054, there was a major schism or split in the Christian church. The Eastern Church, which became the Orthodox Church, split from the Catholic Church, which was the Western Church of Christianity. Okay, that happened in the year 1054. I've noticed that a lot of my students, when they talk about Christianity, they talk about Catholicism as if it is not a Christian religion. It's kind of on its own separate thing. But indeed, the Catholic Church, Catholicism, is a major denomination of Christianity. Okay. If we follow along quickly with the history of Christianity, there was another major split that was going to occur in the church. Does anyone happen to know what that next major split was and when it occurred and where it occurred? And if you do, then please type it in the chat feature. So we're looking for the second major split that occurred in Christianity. I'm hoping that the chat feature is working. Is the chat feature working? Last time I did a YouTube live, which was about 5 days ago, the chat feature froze up. All right, so nope, not Judaism. Marissa, thank you. Good morning, but no, it's not. All right, so the second major split in the Christian church occurred during the Protestant Reformation, all right, back in the 16th century, in the 1500s. That's when the Martin Luther basically started the Protestant denomination of Christianity, which split from Catholicism. So today, what do we have? We have three major branches in the Christian faith. We have the Catholic faith, we have the Protestant faith, and we have the Orthodox faith. And a lot of people in the US kind of forget about the Orthodox faith or denomination because we simply don't have very many of them in the US. What comes to mind is Russian Orthodox or Greek Orthodox. So if they aren't here in our face and we don't hear about them, then we don't know that they exist. So three major denominations. All right, so back to my story. So when I was about to be very frank, very honest, I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want anyone to feel bad. I'm only telling my story. I kind of felt bored at the Catholic Church. I wasn't getting anything out of it. So that went along with a number of other reasons. I decided to leave the Catholic Church and I went to, if you're familiar with Orlando, there's a church off of I-4 as you head towards downtown Orlando. As you come into what's called the Fairbanks Turn, on the left-hand side, there's a very big church, and it's Calvary Assembly. It's part of the Assemblies of God denomination of Christianity. It's an evangelical church. And so I started going there. Now, there's a very big difference between how church services are in a Catholic church compared to most most Protestant churches. In Protestant churches, things tend not to be as formal and structured and as subdued. So in a lot of Protestant churches, there's a lot of singing and clapping and getting involved in the service. And I found that to be appealing, especially as a 16, 17-year-old. You know, I'm like, oh, I like the music. It's good. And, you know, clap the hands and you can kind of get involved. And often in Protestant churches, they attract very charismatic preachers, people that have the ability to really get people to listen and to be amazed at how much that how much you think that they know. So I attended the Calvary Assembly of God Church for a couple of years. They had what I thought was a pretty good preacher at the time, and I got very involved in the youth services. The name of the youth services was called Directions. And so that's where I really got to meet a lot of people, a lot of friends that I knew for a long period of my life, in my late teens and my 20s. Those were my peeps, the people I went to church with. And so I would go to church, and I'm not lying, Sunday morning, sometimes Sunday afternoon. I'd go Sunday night, I'd go Wednesday night, I'd go Friday night, and I'd hang out with the church people on Saturday. So I was involved in the church. I found it to be very fascinating. It was all new to me. This, you can have a personal relationship with God and Jesus, something that I didn't necessarily encounter in the Christian in the Catholic Church. So I found it very intriguing, and so I kept doing it more and more and got more and more involved. What I didn't notice at the time was that I was being told a whole lot, directly or indirectly, how I should live my life, how I should think, what I should do, what I should not do. For example, if you aren't familiar with Pentecostal, evangelical type churches, and that's the type of churches I was going to at the time, they frown upon people going to the movies. They frown upon people watching anything above a G-rated movie. They frown upon people listening to secular music. You are kind of told that you should only hang out with us. Um, you don't want to go out and be around other people because they can kind of corrupt your thinking and lead you down the wrong path. And so what I found myself doing was exclusively hanging out with these people and not allowing myself to hang out with people that weren't evangelical Christians. At the time, I thought that was a wonderful thing, and I definitely thought that that was the way to go. Now, looking back at it, I'm like, oh my God, that's not good. That's not good to live such a sheltered life and to not be exposed to different people with different ideas and different thinking. And so when you get caught into that mentality, that's a scary place to be. Being scary at the time. Okay? Not at all. Quite the opposite. That this is something good, that I have found good people and that we have figured out the truth. Everyone else is crazy. Everyone else doesn't know what they're doing. But me and my group, we've got this figured out. That's a bad place to be. Okay. It's a very bad place to be. When any group of people in the world that we live in, this is my beliefs and my opinions, any group of people that they think they have figured everything out and they know ultimate truth, and you need to follow what they're telling you, or the consequences will be severe, like in the case of religion, it's hell, you're in a dangerous place. You know, if you look through all the different religions of the world, they all have a lot of things in common, which is pretty fascinating. But one of the things they all claim is to know ultimate truth. And that's impossible. We are human beings, and there's no way for any of us to know ultimate truth. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. So, all right. So, Marissa, I see sounds culty. Yes, today, as I look back at it, I do believe that I was in a cult. I don't think that the millions and millions of evangelicals and Pentecostals today in the United States believe that they're in a cult. And I'm not saying that they are in a cult. I'm saying that as I look back over my experience, I think that I was part of a cult. All right. So, um, Benny Hinn. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the televangelist, Benny Hinn. I went to Benny Hinn's church. He was based here in Orlando back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. Now I think he's out of Texas. If you don't know who Benny Hinn is, look him up on YouTube. He is a faith healer, as he calls himself. Um, very, very charismatic preacher. When I went to his church, it was phenomenal. It was, wow, this guy was incredible, a wonderful speaker. Um, Now I look back and go, wow, well, what was I thinking? What was I thinking when I went to this place and bought into everything that I heard and never questioned any of it? It really scares me that I got so deep into it. Um, all right, so moving forward, after spending quite a number of years at Benny Hinn's church and Calvary Assembly, um, the youth group broke away from Calvary Assembly, the group that I belonged to. I mentioned it. It was called Directions. And hey, Mohammed, glad to see you here. Um, and the youth group broke away. It was called Directions. And that's where I really formed some very close knit relationships with my friends because the church was only made up of the people that I hung out with, young people. Um, so I would end up doing this on a Friday night. I would go to where the church met. It was met in a warehouse off of 441 Orange Blossom Trail up near Apopka. There was a nightclub that was in a warehouse right next to where we would meet for church services, and we would go and wait for people to come out of the bar at 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and we would preach to them. We would attempt to save them because you can only assume that they were going to hell because they were in a bar. This made me feel extremely uncomfortable when I was out um, preaching to people because, number one, I'm very much of an introvert, which is interesting because you might think, well, why do you do what you do for work? You get over it. But at the time, I was very much an introvert, and going out and talking to strangers and telling them that they're going to hell because they don't believe what I believe, that made me feel very uncomfortable. However, I did it because I felt that I had to do it. I didn't feel like I had a choice in it. It was part of my responsibility as an evangelical Christian to go out and to save people. Um, all right, so fast forwarding, going to that church, building better bonds with the people, the friends that I went to church with there. Um, then I started teaching. I got my first teaching job at Valencia East Campus. And wouldn't you know that one of the major things talked about in sociology is religion. And so when I first started teaching, I could only teach about religion from a book perspective because I really knew very little about religion other than what I knew from the Catholic faith and what I knew from just a couple Protestant denominations like uh, the Pentecostals, evangelicals, and the Assemblies of God. And so as I started teaching more and more, I started wondering, maybe instead of simply teaching about religion from what the book tells me or what I know about religion from what I've read, maybe I need to go out and experience it. Maybe I need to go out and see what some of these other religious people are doing. So for 2 or 3 years, I decided to go on a journey and to visit as many different types of religious organizations that I could possibly visit. And so during that 2 years, I would look through the phone book at the time, look on the internet, and just randomly pick a different church, synagogue, mosque, temple, whatever I could find out when they meet, go there and sit through a service. And it was fascinating. And if you have the time on your hands to do so, I highly recommend that you consider doing something like that yourself. It's extremely enlightening. So I went to a Greek Orthodox church. I went to a Lutheran church. I went to Episcopalian, Seventh-day Adventist, Mormon temple. I went to, I went to a couple Jewish synagogues. I went to a couple Islamic mosques. I went to a couple Buddhist temples, Hindu temples. I went to a couple New Age meetings. It was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating. And so through that, I learned that I was making a lot of judgments on people that I knew little or nothing about. Because remember, not long ago, I was talking about how I would go out and evangelize to people, telling them that, hey, you're going to hell and you better convert to what I believe in. And my assumption was that I actually knew what I was talking about. Well, I didn't know what I was talking about. Okay. I was only going on what I had been brainwashed or told to do, and that is to go out and convert people to what I believe because what we believe as a group is right and everyone else is wrong. So I learned a lot from that experience. I also started doing a lot of reading at that time and a lot of questioning. And what I did was I basically kind of just stopped going to church because I started to see that I wasn't sure where I needed to go with my spiritual journey at that period. Um, I did not at the time feel like I wanted to associate with any particular Christian denomination. I was still a Christian at the time. So the thought of going to becoming Buddhist or Muslim or Jewish or anything like that was totally out of the question. I still knew that I was a Christian, but I didn't know where I fit in the Christian church. So I decided, okay, I don't want to go to a church anymore, but I'm going to do a lot more research and reading. So I started reading and reading and reading. And it was mind blowing. It was absolutely mind blowing. So I want to share a book with you that I read. Here's the book. It's actually a series of 3 books. The author of the book is Neil Donald Walsh, and the name of the book is Conversations with God. Um, we have friends that live out in Oregon who we were having a conversation one day about religion, and they said, "Read this book. You're going to like it." I've read a lot of books in my day, but this is probably the most mind blowing book I've ever read in my life, especially when it comes to religion. What this author has done is he has basically, the whole book is set up like he's asking God questions, any question you could ever imagine, and God responds back to him. And all of the answers that are provided are answers that you might not normally think that you would get. And so I would read the book like this. I'd read a sentence or 2 sentences and I'd go, oh my God, that's incredible. I never thought about that. And then I'd pick the book up and I'd read the next sentence or a paragraph and I'd close the book. It took me forever to read this book because I just had to sit and close the book and think about what I had read. And so by the time I got done, I was like, my mind was blown. And Marissa, I see that you have the book, an incredible book. So if you haven't read it, you've never heard of it, I would recommend considering reading it. I will warn you that if you are very religious, very dedicated to the religion that you're a part of, especially Christianity, because this is very much geared towards Christianity, it may be very difficult for you to read this. I gave a copy of this to someone. I won't mention that person's name. Um, but the person read the first, I think, maybe the first couple few pages and gave it back to me and said, I can't read this. Uh, it challenges me too much. And I'm like, but that's what this is all about. That's what this is all about. That's what enlightenment is all about. That's what I think life should all be all about challenging what you believe to be true, not simply going along with what has been, as I talk about in class so many times, what's been beat into your head and shoved down your throat. And so seek out opportunities that will truly challenge what you believe to be true by reading books that you know will challenge you, talking to people that you know look at the world differently than you. That will help to prevent you from getting in a situation like I think I was when I was a teenager, being in a cult. All right. So, but after having gone to all of these different churches, having read this book, really sitting back and carefully thinking about all the years of information that's been beat into my head and shoved down my throat, I started to really get to the point that I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure where I go from here. Now, for a lot of very religious people, that's a scary place to be, because when it comes to religion, we want to make sure that we have this all figured out, because, again, the consequences, we are told, can be severe. Well, I'm not convinced of that today, but um, so I just continued reading and continued questioning and decided I'm going to kind of see where things take me. All right, so I'm sitting on the couch one night watching the watching a program, and a commercial comes on. And so this is going to be a little odd the way I'm doing this, but I want to show you the commercial that I saw on television. If you can see this, I see that there's some reflection there. So I do the best that I can and watch this commercial, and then I'm going to talk about it. Okay, is it going to play?
The United Church of Christ. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you're welcome here.
All right, Mohammed, I see your question, and I'm going to answer it a little bit later about how was it hard for my family to see me convert to another religion, Buddhism? Yes, my mother told me I was going to hell, but I'll get back to that later. All right, so I'm watching television, and I see that commercial. If you couldn't see it, you can look it up on YouTube. Look up United Church of Christ ejector commercial. And basically, what you hopefully saw was you saw a single mother with a child that was screaming, and she was ejected out of the church. You saw a very obvious gay male couple who one put his hand or his arm around the other guy. They were ejected from the church. You saw also someone that probably was homeless walk in, and also was ejected. What's the purpose of the commercial? The commercial was, God doesn't reject anyone, nor do we. And so I was kind of stunned, like, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this before. Most churches have certain groups of people that they don't approve of, like gay people. And that is certainly the case for Christianity. There are very, very few Christian denominations that are openly accepting of gay people. And so I ran in and told my husband about the commercial. They didn't have it on the internet at the time, so I had to wait until it came back on television, which I think was a few days later. I yelled for him. He came looking at it, and we looked at each other like, could it be true that there's actually a church out there that won't judge us for who we are? So to make a long story short, we ended up going to one in Orlando. We got it very involved. We went to the church for 4 years. A lot of great people there. Most of them very open-minded, wonderful, great, what I believe to be true Christians. And it was a good experience. We went there for 4 years. We were, again, like I said, very involved. We were so involved that at one point I ended up becoming the moderator or the president of the board for the church. Unfortunately, where there were a very few very conservative Christians who attended the church. I'm not sure why they would want to attend what is a very liberal denomination, but they chose to. And they started making up some pretty wicked stories about how I, for example, wanted to convert the church to be a gay church, which could be nothing from the truth, nothing further from the truth. I purposely did not, or nor would I ever want to go to a gay church, because being gay is only a part of who I am, and it's not who I am. And I don't want to go to a church where the focus is about being gay. I wanted to go to a church where the focus was everybody loves everybody, and this is the message of Jesus. And we thought we had found that church, but apparently we didn't. So, but that's okay. I'm not here for sympathy. I'm not here for your tears. It all worked out wonderful in the long run, so it's all great. All right, so yes, the gay agenda. Yes, I've got my big agenda, and I'm trying to push it and to convert the world. I will not be happy until all people are gay. No, that's not the truth. All right, so this is in my late 30s, early 40s that we're going to this church. Um, so after this course of events kind of played through in the church that we were going to, we decided, well, you know what? We're not going to do this anymore. There are other things we can be doing with our time on Sundays. So we started going to the church of Disney. Disney became our church, and the water parks and Universal Studios, and it's all wonderful. We continue to go there today, and we love those places. It's kind of like an escape from reality for us. All right, so meantime, there's going to be a big change that's coming down the road for me, and I didn't see that big change coming, but it was coming. And so here's what happened. Back about 8 to 10 years ago, I started taking my students to a Buddhist temple in Kissimmee. And my intent of taking my students there was simply to expose them to a religion that I'm thinking most of them had never been exposed to. It would make no sense for me to take my students to a Christian church, knowing that most of my students are Christian, or certainly living in a Christian country are very familiar with Christianity. So I thought, where can I take my students to have an experience where it would be very different than what they're accustomed to? And so I found, hey, there's a Buddhist temple in Kissimmee. So let me try this out. So I started taking my students there. I started getting to know the abbot, and the abbot is someone who is the head monk of a Buddhist temple. I started getting to know him very well, and so I'd take 2 or 3 classes there every semester. So I'd see him 3 times a year, and he would basically talk about the basics of Buddhism, which, if you want to, I can talk about that kind of at the end. But as I listened to him and talk about Buddhism, each time I kind of listened and went, wow, this is really interesting stuff. Why have I never heard about this before? And the more I listened to him, the more fascinated I became. So I started finding books about it. I started listening to podcasts about Buddhism. I started meeting with him one on one to ask him questions and to explore Buddhism. And the more and more I learned over a period of maybe 3 to 4 years, the more and more intrigued I got. And the more and more I thought, you know what? This is me. This is me. This stuff resonates with me. And so at that time, now here, this might become a little controversial. Again, as I've said before, or say again and again and again, this is my story. I'm not telling you what I'm telling you to make you upset, to get you mad, to tell you that what you believe is wrong, to convert you. None of that is the case. I'm only telling you my story. But I was at a point in my life that as I looked at the big picture, I looked at Christianity and I said to myself, this doesn't work for me anymore. Yes, this is what I was raised in. Yes, this is basically all I've ever known, but it doesn't work for me anymore. And why did it not work for me anymore? Because I started to truly compare what I thought were the teachings of Jesus to the teachings of the Christian church. And the two didn't match. And for me, they didn't match at all. To me, the teachings of Jesus was love, acceptance, tolerance. The teachings of the church, judgment, hate, sin, guilt. You must believe what we believe. Those people are wrong. Those people are sinners. Those people are going to hell because those people don't believe what we believe. And it really started to mess with my mind. And I started thinking, wow, there's got to be some truth in here somewhere, but where is the truth? Because everybody claims to know the truth. The Catholics claim to know the truth. The Protestants claim to know the truth. The Buddhists claim to know the truth. The Muslims claim to know the truth. The Jews claim to know the truth. The agnostics, people that say, I don't know if there is a God or isn't a God, we can't determine that. They're probably the only ones that don't claim to know the truth, by the way. They go, I don't know. The atheists claim to know the truth. There is no God. You know, atheism is actually a belief system, a belief that there's no God. Everybody claims to know the truth. But how often do we ask ourselves, could I be wrong? Could what I believe be wrong? And the answer is yes. We could be wrong. And a lot of people are not willing to admit that. And that's why we end up in some of the situations that we end up in. That's why we've had so many wars throughout history. So many wars are based on religion. My religion is right, yours is wrong. You need to come over to my way of thinking. To me, my opinion, it's very arrogant thinking. I was a very arrogant young person. I was a very arrogant Christian, thinking that I was right, but the other 7 billion people on the planet are wrong, dead wrong. This was really hard for me to deal with myself because I did come from a very religious Christian background. And all I had beat in my head again and again and again and again and again is what we tell you, your faith, Christianity is right, and everything else is wrong. It took me a lot to get over that. Okay. So I decided I would convert to Buddhism because it makes sense to me. I want to mention a couple things about Buddhism. Buddhism is actually more of a philosophy or a way of life than it is a religion. Um, I want to read to you our definition of religion and sociology. I think it's very important at this time for us to understand that it's different than how people define religion in pop culture, per se. In sociology, we define religion as a social institution involving beliefs and practices based on a conception of the sacred. Okay? A social institution involving beliefs and practices based on the conception of the sacred. So let me pull that apart. A social institution, much like education and politics and healthcare and the economy, that involves beliefs and practices. Beliefs are things that we have going on up here. Practices are things that we do, and all religions have certain beliefs. All religions have certain uh, things that they consider to be special or revered. That's sacred. And all religions have certain practices, things that they do. And so, if we use that definition of religion, Buddhism can be considered a religion. Why? Because Buddhism has beliefs and practices that are based on the conception of the sacred. But you might notice that there's something important perhaps missing from the definition. And what's missing? God. There's no mention of God in that definition. Why? Because in sociology, we want to be more inclusive in our definition of religion. If we included God, then we could not include, um, should we say, systems like Buddhism. So my point in saying all that is that Buddhism is truly more of a philosophy, a way of life, a way of thinking than it is a religion, a faith system. The major religions of the world, including Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, are all faith systems. What does that mean? That means that someone tells you something, a religious leader or um, a pastor, priest, an imam, a pandit, whoever it might be, or a holy book like the Bible, the Quran. It says something, and you are to believe it without hardcore evidence. That's what faith is. Buddhism is nothing like that at all. Buddhism is a way of life. This is the way that life is, if you like it or not. And Buddhism has a lot to do with suffering. There's a lot of suffering in the world, and a lot of that suffering we bring into our lives. And Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, who lived 600 years before Christ over in northern India, was an extremely intelligent man. He was not a god, never claimed to be God, um, never wanted to be worshipped like a god, just was a really super smart guy and came up with some really smart, incredible teachings. And if you read any of those teachings, if you examine or research Buddhism at all, I bet many of you would go, wow, this is really incredible stuff. So I encourage you to think about it. But I am in no way at all trying to encourage you to become a Buddhist. No, Buddhists don't do that. Okay. Everyone needs to find their own path in life. And some people choose to stick with the path that they were born into. That's what most people do. I challenge you to think differently, to look at all of the different religions out there, look at all of the different philosophies, get to know them, see which one resonates with you, explore it, and decide if should I make a transition? Should I change? You know, should you simply stick with something because that's what you were raised and born into? I don't know. I don't know. All right. So now I consider myself a Buddhist. That's my philosophy in life. I don't agree with everything when it comes to Buddhism. Indeed, I want to show you. I just finished reading a book. Just finished reading this a couple days ago. The Scientific Buddha. I picked this up at a bookstore when we were in Portugal. So my sister-in-law, if she's still there, this is the book that I picked up, and I just finished reading it. And this book is somewhatly critical to Buddhism, and I think that's a wonderful thing because people that have intellectual curiosity are willing to listen to what other people say about things that you adamantly believe in. And I'm not saying that I adamantly believe in Buddhism, but from what I've learned about it, I really like what I've learned. But this book challenged me a little bit in how I think about Buddhism. And I find that to be a very, very good thing because Buddhism is not perfect. It's far from perfect. I don't think that there's any religion or philosophy that's perfect. And so I was willing to open up my mind and read about a religion, read about Buddhism, and say, "Oh, okay, yeah, there are some problems here," um, and it's important for us to do. So I think I'm forgetting some stuff, but I think I'm going to start looking at questions here. So I'd like you, if you have not asked the question yet, feel free to ask me any question that you'd like to ask me, and I will answer it to the best of my ability. But please get involved if you'd like to. So I'm going to look over the question list here. So the first question I see here is from Mohammed. So let's see. In Islam, they believe that everything in the religion is right, and if you question other religions, you are sinning, and you will eventually become an atheist, which is wrong, and you will go to hell. So, Muhammad, I find this to be the case for just about every religion. I clearly saw that multiple times in Christianity. Every Christian church that I am familiar with and visited, all of them basically say, "Hey, we've got this figured out. Okay, we know what we're doing." All of those people, they're lost. They're confused. They need to see the light. They need someone to bring them over to the right way of thinking. If they don't, they're going to go to hell. We don't want them to go to hell. This is the same in Hinduism. This is the same in Judaism. This is very, very, very common in, I think, most of the religions. You know, if we were to list all of the different major religions in the world and all of the different tenets and beliefs and practices of all those churches and religions and faiths and denominations, we would see that there are a lot of similarities. But we'd also see that there are very clear differences. Then, as a critical thinker, you would have to ask yourself, okay, well, there is no way that all of these can be right. Someone's got to be wrong. So who's wrong? Well, here's how most people respond to that question. Oh, I'm not. There's no way that I could be wrong. Everyone else is wrong, but I'm not wrong. So if you think like that, you have to ask yourself the question, how is it that you are so incredibly lucky to have figured it all out? I guarantee you that if you were born in another country, let's say like India, and you were born into a Hindu family. I was over in India a year ago, and when I travel abroad, I always ask people about social issues, their government, their economy, their educational system, their healthcare system, and I bring up religion. And I ask them questions like, why are you a Hindu? And I always get the same response, regardless of where I am, because I'm a Hindu. That's not a good answer, though. To me, that's not a good answer. I think that's a good answer for most people because that's what I am. That's what we are here. But it takes a lot more intellectual curiosity and investigation for you to connect with what best connects or resonates with you. Just sticking with what's been beat into your head and shoved down your throat is the easy way out. That's my opinion. Not trying to get you mad, not trying to get you upset. I'm not telling you what you believe is wrong. Again, I just want to repeat that again and again and again and again. Okay. So, Mohammed, Muslims have a lot of company out there. They're all doing the same thing. All right. Was it hard for your family to see you convert to another religion? Well, I'm definitely the black sheep of my family. At least that's how I perceive it. I could be wrong. Coming out as a gay person to my family, that was a lot of fun. Um, there's a lot of hell involved in my family because the result of not following the rules is hell. And so telling family members I'm gay, my mother, I told her I was gay. Oh, you're going to hell. Same thing when I told them that I was now a Buddhist and no longer a Christian because Christianity doesn't work for me anymore. Oh, by the way, the message of Christ is awesome. The man was right on. Uh, Jesus was all about love and peace and serving and being real. And I mean, the message of Christ is awesome. I love it. I don't think the church reflects that today. That's my opinion. And and I don't want to be associated with what I feel is not ethically moral for what I believe, or move away from that. Um, so the family didn't take it very well because I wasn't being who they wanted me to be. And that's something I talk about in class. People want you to be who they want you to be. Most people are generally not interested in you being who you want to be or that you feel that you are. Okay, let me say this again. People are generally not interested in you being who you want to be. People are generally interested in you being who they want you to be. And when you are not who other people want you to when you don't meet the expectations of what other people want you to be, then there's going to be trouble. Trust me, I know. But I believe to be all that you can be, to be an intellectual person, to have intellectual curiosity, to truly move down your path that you create in life, you have to make hard choices. And those hard choices might include things like not being who other people want you to be, but being who you think that you truly are. So, Mohammed, it didn't go well, but um, that's okay. Let's see other questions. Why can't society, Mohammed again, why can't society and the whole world just accept everyone? Why does it matter what others believe? It matters because, coming from an evangelical background, it mattered to me because I felt that other people were going to hell. And it was my ethical and moral and religious duty to keep people from going to hell because they didn't believe what I believed. There's only one way. And through evangelical Christianity, the one way is submitting your life to Jesus. And you are told in evangelical Christianity that if people don't do that, there is one and only outcome, and that is hell, period. There are no exceptions. And so, as an evangelical Christian, you don't want to see that happen. You don't want to see that happen to your family. You don't want to see that happen to your friends. You don't want to see that with people that you work with. You don't want to even see that with strangers. You don't want to be responsible for people going to hell. So, what do? You go out and you try to convert people to your way of thinking. And it's not just evangelical Christians. I'm thinking that's probably happening in the Islamic faith and the Jewish faith and all the others that are out there because everyone thinks that they're right. How did people react when you went on your journey to different religious groups? Were they eager to bring you in? All right, so I can answer this in two different ways. Great question, Naomi. Let me answer this the first way. How did my friends at the time react to my going to different types of churches? Keep in mind that my friends at the time were my evangelical friends, and they did not take it well at all. They thought that I was losing my mind. I heard things like, why would you ever go to that church over there? Why are you going to an Islamic mosque? Why are you going to a Buddhist temple? What is going on with you? They're going to brainwash you. It caused a lot of commotion among my friends, which started really getting me thinking, what is so terrible about this? Why is it so bad to go out and listen to what other people have to say? And that was a big red flag for me. Like, is there another agenda going on here? Are these people trying to control me and to tell me what I should do and what I shouldn't do? Now, I'm not convinced that they knew that's what they were doing, but looking back on it, I think that's what was happening. So the second way I can answer your question is all of the different churches and temples and mosques that I went to, all of the people were extremely welcoming, very welcoming. I think there was only one place that I went to where they were semi, okay, if you walk out the door, we don't care. And I think there's a reason for that. The reason for that is all churches are trying to recruit people. And when people walk into the doors of a church, a mosque, a synagogue, a temple, whatever it may be, and you start judging them and laughing at them or pointing at them and making fun of them, they're not going to be able to recruit you as a member, as a money giving member. So, yeah, people are very accepting when you go to different churches. So that should not preclude you from going out and visiting different churches in the community. Something really awesome to consider doing. I see that we're over an hour. I don't necessarily have a 1 hour deadline on this, but I don't see any other questions in the live chat here. Does anyone else have any questions? Because I don't want to just ramble on and on and on and on for no reason. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in now. As I'm giving you a minute to do that, again, I want to reiterate my purpose in doing this was only to share my story. I don't want anyone taking any offense to anything that I've talked about. This is my story. These are my thoughts. These are my opinions. I could be wrong, and I probably am. Um, I'm not trying to get you to convert to anything. I'm just wanting you to open up your mind, expose yourself to different ideas and thinking and ways of thought and religion and philosophy. You're going to see that in the lecture I put together. If you've not watched the religion lecture, please make sure that you watch it. I sent all of my students, a link in the lecture that you should be watching. I talked about this movie, Religulous. It's put together by a comedian. His name is Bill Maher. I highly recommend that you watch this because this will show some of the major problems in the three major Western religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And some of these things you may not be familiar with, and it's all about thinking and thought. And so you have to look past the sarcasm, though, because he's a very sarcastic person. If you only look at it and you buy into the sarcasm, you're not going to get anything out of this. But I highly recommend that you take a look at this. You might find it on YouTube, you might find it on Netflix or one of these other streaming services. But if you do watch it, tell me what you think. All right, share your thoughts with me. Let's see here. Can you talk a bit more about Buddhism? Okay, I will. Interested in currently practice New Age. Uh, New Age, I think there's some good in New Age. I don't know a lot about it, but a lot of it is, I think, about the way that we think, which is a lot about Buddhism. You are welcome. I'm glad to share my story with you. I don't know a lot about neo pagans, so I am sorry, I cannot speak to that. I'd like to learn more about it. What about being spiritual rather than religion? I guess that's kind of what I consider myself. As I mentioned earlier, my philosophy is Buddhism. Um, my religion, I don't know, spiritual, agnostic, atheist. I don't know. I don't know where I'm at yet. Um, yeah, I don't know. Buddhism, and Kayla says, I just don't know either. To me, right now, at the point that I'm at in my life, that this is the only logical way of approaching religion. To me, the only logical way of approaching all of this is, I don't know, because there's probably a lot of stuff out there I simply don't know. I didn't know about Buddhism for a long time. But as a Christian, as a very conservative Christian, I condemned Buddhism along with Hinduism, Islam, and the other religions because I was told all bad, it's all evil. But as I took the time to learn about Buddhism and the other religion, I'm like, this stuff isn't bad. This is some pretty fascinating stuff. Um, any other questions? So I want to talk about Buddhism because Naomi asked about that, but uh, that may be like the last thing I talk about. Any other questions? No. Buddhism was founded by a man by the name of Siddhartha Gautama. He was a regular man born in what is now southern Nepal, northern India. He was a prince destined to become a king. His father desperately wanted him to become the next king, but he was a very curious kid. You're welcome, Mohammed. I'm glad that you could join us, and please give some thought to what I've talked about. Um, but Buddha, or he was a very curious kid, and he wanted to see what was going on in the world. So he left the palace. His parents kept him kind of confined and in the palace, so he didn't know what the real world was like. And he went out and he kind of experienced what the real world was like, and he found out that there was a lot of suffering in the world. And he, wow, I didn't see any of this in the temple, where I'm sorry, the palace where I lived. And so he decided at the age of 29 that he didn't want to become the future king, that he wanted to become some type of a spiritual student or maybe a spiritual teacher. So he went out and spent 6 years of his life from age 29 to 35, spending time talking to spiritual people and masters and teachers at the time and traveling that part of the world. To make a long story short, at the age of 35, he became very frustrated because he had tried everything to become enlightened and nothing worked. So he decided that he would sit underneath of a Bodhi tree and he would not move until he became enlightened. I'm not exactly sure how it all happened, but blah, blah, it happened. He became enlightened. And so for the next 50 years, he was a great, he never claimed to be God. He wasn't a god. He didn't want to be worshipped as a god. So in Buddhism, Buddha is simply a really intelligent spiritual teacher. Okay, he's not a god, but he's a really smart one. Here's his first teaching. His very first teaching was on what he called the Four Noble Truths. He said that there are four absolutes in life. The first absolute is suffering. And by that, he meant that there's suffering all over the world. And if you look at it, think about you and I suffer, animals suffer, the earth suffers. Everything is in a state of suffering. Okay. There are lots of reasons why there's suffering, which brings us to the second noble truth, the cause of suffering. Where does suffering come from? Well, we abuse and misuse and kill and harm one another. But a lot of our suffering is actually in our heads. Actually, Buddha said that most of our suffering is right here. Most of our suffering is not here in the body and out there. Most of our suffering is right in here inside of our own heads. And he said that we bring most of that suffering into our life. This whole coronavirus right now. So here's an example. There are a lot of people that are extremely stressed out and have a tremendous amount of anxiety over what's going on. As I have shared before in some of these YouTube live events, this is a pretty crazy situation that we're going through. This is really bad. This is crazy. Okay? There's no a doubt about it. This is bad. However, is it possible that in our minds we are making the situation even worse than what it is? And I think we are. What do? We turn the news on, we turn the radio on, we talk to people that are all stressed out and frantic about the situation, and we just bombard our mind and thinking with all of this stuff that's going on. And it's all bad and negative and negative and negative and negative. And you think what you put in is what you're going to get out. And guess what? People get really stressed out. It's not that we shouldn't be concerned. It's not that we shouldn't be taking care of ourselves and loved ones to make sure that we don't get this. Okay, we need to be doing that. But all of this energy that we're putting into stressing out with anxiety and with worry is doing no good. It's doing absolutely no good at all. And trust me, I'm speaking from great experience here when it comes to worry and stress. Oh, how I love worry and stress. It's one of the hallmarks of my life. Luckily, I'm really trying to tackle that in my life. One of the things that I am committed to is changing the way that I handle bad situations. And Buddhism, along with reading and thinking about things differently, is leading me down a new path. And I'm trying very, very hard not to get stressed out over what's going on. And so I'm like, I'm not going to watch the news. It ain't going to do any good. I can't do anything about this. I'm going to stay aware of what's going on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the time that I have that I normally don't have because I'm busy commuting back and forth to campus or, you know, doing these things on campus that I have to do, like meetings. And I'm going to put that time to good use. I'm going to read a book that I might not get to read because I don't have time. Or I'm going to watch a documentary or watch a show that will challenge what I believe to be true. I'm going to take on a new task, a new challenge, and I'm going to put my time and energy into that and shift my attention from the bad to the good. I think it works. Okay. Doesn't mean that the situation that's going on in the world is not horrible. It is horrible. But what good does it do to worry about it? And so that brings me back again to the second truth. That is the cause of suffering. We bring suffering into our life based on how we look at things. And we can choose to be miserable or we can choose to be happy. That's a choice that only you can make. No one else can make that choice for you. You determine what happens up here. That's a really hard concept if you think about it long and hard to really wrap your head around. Because we think, well, wait a minute, no, all these bad situations that are going all around us, and this is bad, and I need to. No, it's all about your perception, it's all about how you process it. That's the second noble truth, the cause of suffering. And a lot of suffering we bring into our life. The third noble truth is the sensation of cessation of suffering, stopping it. In other words, we can stop our suffering. And the way that we stop our suffering is the fourth noble truth, and that is the Eightfold Path. If you haven't watched my religion lecture as of yet, you're going to hear me talk about the Eightfold Path in that lecture. So make sure that you look for that and you can see what I'm talking about. To give you an example again regarding this coronavirus situation, you can deal with this in your head how you choose to deal with this. Okay? You can choose to be all freaked out, to worry and get stressed out over something that you and I can't control. Or you can choose to say, okay, this is a bad situation. I've done everything that I can do to protect myself and my loved ones. Now, for the benefit of everyone, most importantly myself, I'm going to take my and I'm going to put it on something of value that's positive. So that when all of this coronavirus is done, and eventually, who knows when, eventually it will be done, you can look back and you can say, you know what, I used my time constructively. I got something, I learned something experience. And that's what the Buddha would have preached about. Okay? That's what the Buddha. The Buddha does not care about the truth. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, the newspapers, they do. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm dead wrong. They do not care about reality. They care about ratings, and the better ratings they get, the more sponsors they get, and the more they can charge for their advertising. It's all about money. So the media is not going to focus on what's going right in this time where we pull together. Generally, in times of crisis, we pull together. And that's kind of what's happening to a certain degree in this country, to a certain degree. They're not going to talk about that. They're going to talk about the drama that's involved. And that gets people all wound up and doesn't do anyone any good. It does them lots of good. They're loving this. The media is eating this up. They love this kind of stuff. But the damage that they're doing, the psychological damage that they're doing is just unbelievable. More panic, more money. Yep, Kayla, more panic, more money. Hey, I've gone on, I think, too long. So, um, so that's a basic of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, the first teaching of the Buddha. He had over 84,000 teachings and it's over 50 years of teaching. You can find a lot about Buddhism online. So if you're interested in Buddhism, there are lots of books that you can read. There are podcasts, but don't make Buddhism your one and only go-to. Let me check this out. Check out the other ones too, and see what's out there, what's available to you. Other philosophies. There's some good stuff out there. But all right, so just one more request. Any last questions before I leave you? I want you all to go, for my students attending, I want you to go and study your sociology book. And please listen to that lecture that I put together on religion. Do your discussion postings. Before we leave, I want to announce my next YouTube Live will be a 1 week from today, Wednesday, April the 1st at 10:30. This is going to be a very different one. This is going to be on my NASA. It's going to be about NASA. It's called NASA From Earth to Mars and Beyond. This is part of my solar system ambassador responsibility as a volunteer with NASA. I was going to be doing this in class. So if you're interested in NASA, rockets, space, cosmology, astronomy, any of that stuff, you'll probably want to check it out. And I hope that you can, and I hope that you do. Other than that, I'll probably come up with one or two more YouTube live events before the semester ends. And so, again, thanks for coming, everyone. You're welcome, Naomi. April the 8th. So, yes, 1 week from today, Wednesday, April 8th. Oh, I said the 1st. Sorry, today is the 1st. Thank you, WDW Tuesday. The next YouTube Live is 1 week from today, which is April the 8th at 10:30, the same time. That's the NASA presentation. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Hang in there. Talk to you later. Take care.